Right. Narayan as a literary artist, novelist. So first of all, about the novelist. Again, I remind you that this is not to excessively write about the novelist, otherwise the writer in your answers. But there are certain places that we have to discuss about the novelist and his setting. Okay, but again, I remind you, like Anton Chekhov, knowing about Narayan is also important because you give kind of a depth to your answers if you know about the background of the story writer. Otherwise, you write kind of narrow-minded attitudes in your answers. The shallow answers will be there. So this is written in 1967. When I say it is written in 1967, what is the time that he what is the time that he presents this particular, what is the era that he presents this particular literary work? India gets freedom in 1947. Okay, Sri Lanka gets it in 1948. 1947, India gets a freedom. And this is written after 20 years of India received the freedom from colonization. Then, this is a time that we can call post-colonial India. India, yes, Anuk, thank you. This is the post-colonial India. Before 1947, we call that era colonial India. After 1947 is called post-colonial India. Colonization is Yatat Vijitavada. Okay. After imperialists, otherwise Suddha, English people left the country, that era is called post-colonial era. All right. So the novel is based on a fictional character. Something important. Fictional character called Jagan. All right. He does not include his own biography as a writer in this one. There are certain matches to R.K. Narayan. If you read about his background, there are certain overlappings, certain similarities to Jagan's character, but mainly we find Jagan's character is a fictional character. It is a created character. Okay. And he's a vendor. Who is a vendor? Vendor means a seller. Seller represents the merchants community in India. Seller represents economy in India. Okay. Perhaps it is a growing capitalistic society. Growing capitalism in India. Capitalism. We discussed it in connection to Twilight of a Crane as well. Japan's growing capitalism. Now we discuss about India's growing capitalism. So there are sellers, there are merchants in the story, and certain changes of attitudes in the merchants display the changes of their attitudes regarding money and the capitalism in the society. This too becomes a very close reference to the India that R.K. Narayan used to live. Okay. And again, people say that when the people analyze the topic of vendor of sweets in this way as well. Sweet is sweet. When you eat sweet, you get kind of inspiration. But think about this. If you sell your sweet, I have sweet. Without eating, I sell my sweet. Then your life is not sweet, but you give sweet to other people. So this I found in certain analysis, it's not actually a very serious finding, but I find it is kind of it has kind of a relevance to the story. Vendor of sweets, I sell my sweets, but I don't eat it, perhaps, right? So the setting, students learn about this particular technical term. Setting is a literary device. It's a literary device. Mostly we call it it comes as a narrative device as well. Setting means the place of the story and time of the story in very simple terms. It has broader definition as well, but I say, where does the action takes place? Where does action take place and when does it take place? So I was talking about post-colonial India, that is a time, this is India, and this is happening in a fictional town called Malgudi. Fictional town called Malgudi, right? Then this is the fictional universe that I rather found on Google, fictional universe. What is a fictional universe? This word will be important for you. In fictional universe, you don't find exact places that you can find on Google Map. Okay, they are created by the writer. Now, in English novelists, also we find the same habit. Sometimes they create their map. When we search, we don't find that the exact map on Google, right? Here we find the fictional universe includes many of the important and needed places amalgamated in one geographical area. All right. This will be important for you. I feel like asking you to take notes in the sense short notes like, is a born storyteller with fine sense of tragicomedy. Tragicomic aspects are there. That can be one question as well. What are the tragedy, comedy, amalgamated actions we find in the play, in the drama? I'm sorry, I was in a drama. Now I'm talking about novel. In the novel, sorry. All right, in the novel. Yes, comic actions are there, comic incidents are there, but under all the comic incidents, we find there's a tragedy connected to that. Then, mostly R.K. Narayan's writing style is well connected to India and Indian setting. Even though he had associations to some foreign countries with foreign writers, he had foreign education as well, but he tries his level best to make his writing mostly and specifically Indian. And he talks about assumptions, attitudes, and mostly that he's well connected to Indian Dharma, Hindu Dharma as well. In this novel as well, we find that he promotes certain Hindu Dharma. What happens to Jagan ultimately is that he leaves out everything, leaves out materialistic things, and he decides to move away to kind of spiritual life. Okay, so there is a promotion of Hinduism, Hindu culture, Indianness in most of his novels. This should be understood. And he discusses the world of politics, but he does not mention the names of politicians and political parties much. But he sees how political scenario changes in the society. I'll be explaining this most in the coming slides, right? He has been an optimist. Optimist means that he used to look at the society in a very positive manner. Even though when you examine Jagan's character, whatever happens, whatever the reaction of the sun, he receives different reactions from the sun. Even though certain reactions are completely contrasting, right? He never expected such reactions from the sun. But the next step after experiencing that, the next step is kind of refixing his emotion and thinking about that particular experience as a positive one. He looks at the sun positively in the next level, and again he does Mali does something bad. He looks at that in a very positive manner. He looks at certain things in a very optimistic point of view. So, Narayan stories as a whole can be defined like this. So, this is a prior action before you read a novel. Usually I advise my students, take a blank book and write topics like social information I find in this novel. economic information I can find in this novel. Then political information I can receive in this novel. Then interpersonal information. Interpersonal means relationships. And intrapersonal means inside a person, psychological relationships. For example, your psychology has different facets, like your brain says something, your heart says something else. Sometimes you say, okay, don't go to school today. Your heart says, but your brain says, you can't avoid, you have to go. So there's kind of internal control in you. Person, there's a kind of relationship between brain and heart. That is what we call intrapersonal qualities, right? Under that, we can write about the psychological status of characters, emotions of characters. So when you study the novel, it's even now you can do that. You can take a piece of paper and write about the social information you receive from the novel, because it will be kind of a very comprehensive short note to answer the questions you get in essay type paper. Example, questions will be diverted to these areas. Suppose the social change in India represented through the novel falls into social information. Political information. As I told you, there is no much of information about macro politics. Macro politics means party politics, voting, elections, parliament, or something like that. Here we get micro-political aspects. Remember that word, micro-political aspects. Micro-political aspects means, otherwise micro-politics means politics that we all can experience in micro level of settings. Like your brother and your sister, otherwise your brother and you. Sometimes your brother tries to control you. There's a kind of politic control over someone. Okay, mothers, fathers control over the mother. Otherwise, dominant control of an adult over someone. Okay, and again in nature we find certain micropolitical concepts, like one animal kills another. Now in To the Evening Star we find evil animals to consume innocent animals. There is politic in that. Okay, there is politic. We call them micro-political aspects. Under that, we find gender politics, racial politics. Especially in Sri Lanka, we could find racial politics. We could find even, in South Asia, we find gender politics, man or woman. Which one is better? So we discuss about them, right? So we have to find about what sort of politics do we find in this one. In this novel, we find parental politics, father, son, parental politic, and gender politic, Mali's and Grace's relationship, Jagan's and wives' relationship. There we find male gender controls over female gender. So this is something that you should note. Then economic information. So the economic information we receive in the novel runs through Jagan's character as well. Jagan is a vendor. And Jagan's different actions that he takes at different stages of life. At one place, if you remember, that he decides to reduce the prices of sweetmeats. And that provokes the anger of other vendors. Because when the price is dropped, that they get a kind of a threat. Right? All these are economic information we receive in the novel. And what about dollars? American dollars, Indian rupee. This discussion is also kind of connected to economic information, right? Then interpersonal information like Jagan's and Mali's and Grace's, Jagan and Kazin's relationship. All this information seep through the novel. Don't ever think that this is only a story. You can't do that because you are students of literature who are reading the novel for literary purposes. You're not rather reading the novel for enjoyment only. Therefore, make sure that you go beyond that and think beyond the level of enrichment, right? Intrapersonal means psychological changes of characters, like how depression appears in Jagan at the last moment of the novel, last part of the novel. He gets depressed with all these. And dilemma, D-I-L-E-M-M-A, dilemma, hesitation, doing this, doing that, this, that mentality, giving money or not giving money, accepting Mali or not accepting Mali. So these are psychological, otherwise intrapersonal information we receive in the novel. Okay, so when you study a novel, even now you can do that. You can rather take different papers and write these topics. Even while this discussion is going on, you can rather fill that sheet, fill those sheets rather. Chapter 1. I'll be giving a little summary of chapter 1. The novel's setting is introduced. I said setting is, what is setting? Setting is a place and time. Okay, setting is post-colonial India. And again, we find that India is subjected to transformation from tradition to modernity. The modernity is displayed through Mali and the friends, sometimes attitudes of Mali, attempts of Mali, some rejections of Mali. All right. So this is a time we find transformation of India, otherwise Eastern to Western. There are two transformations. Harima Samanai, but there are certain differences, right? Tradition to modernity, Eastern to Western. Okay, this is how the novel is introduced. And Jagan's and Kasin's characters are introduced. Jagan is a father of Mali. Jagan is the protagonist of the novel. And who is a Kasin? And I rather invite you to focus on Kasin's character. Okay, Kasin's character is not rather highlighted like Luca in The Bear, but he plays kind of a massive role in the novel. He becomes a mediator. Remember this term, he acts as the mouthpiece, the one who talks, mouthpiece of Jagan and Mali at certain places. And he becomes a communicator, intermediator, right? And he's the one who is fixing attitudes between father and son, negotiates. Okay, he's introduced as a Kasin, and he's a Kasin of everybody. He's not related, right? But Mataka tiyaganna, Jagan is a father. Jagan is the father of Mali. Jagan is so specific to his own son only. He's not rather relevant. He's not rather sensitive to other children in the society, right? When little children come in asking sweets, he chases them away. But this Kasin has no boundary. He doesn't have much of selection of people, right? Even though he's a blood cousin or relation, otherwise a friend, otherwise not at all a friend, he's something new to you. He doesn't care about them. He serves everybody in the same way. So he is kind of a diplomatic character presented in the novel. In this novel, we find Jagan becomes a follower of Gandhi. In chapter 1, it is described in that way. He has food theories, behavioral patterns based on, otherwise molded upon Gandhian principles. And he is presented as a shrewd businessman. Okay, he talks that he used to live with kind of natural ways of living. But on the opposite, we find that he does not practice such theories in his business. Okay, he's a conventional Indian, traditional Indian. And the term Bhagavad Gita is introduced in chapter 1. Okay, and he's an inconsistent, unstable mentality is there in him, right? Yes, and he has already become a writer. But the problem is this, ironically, that book is not published yet, right? Think about them. Chapter 1 introduces Jagan, basically Jagan's professional life. Jagan's attitudes are introduced in chapter 1. Chapter 2, it focuses on Mali's and Jagan's relationship. Basically, technically, when you write it, it is parent-child relationship. Okay, parent-child relationship. And here we come to know that Jagan is a single parent, single father. So it's important to analyze that particular term. It can be a question area as well. Please, guys, write down the areas that I suggest as question areas, because they are very important for you, right? In this discussion, at least I'll be talking about 20 to 30 question areas. කියන්න බෑ නෝ question එකක් එන්න පුළුවන් අපි දන්නේ නැහැ. අපි guess කරනවා නේ, we can rather think about it, right? He's a single parent, single father. And think about these two conditions, single mother and single father. Father dies, mother lives with the child, and mother dies, father lives with the child. Then he has to act as, remember this term, foster mother and father and a foster mother. Okay, he has to foster the child as a mother as well. Sometimes fathers constant emphasis on having food and constant inquiries about education and all display that he's playing the role of father and mother both. He attempts to rather play the part of both. That is something very important. That is described here. After wife's death, it is that he has this maternal obsession. He's attempting to highlight, he is attempting to fulfill that the part that he lost with the mother's absence. And there is kind of a guilty consciousness as well in Jagan. We all know that Jagan's wife Ambika dies because of his inconsiderate behaviors, his dominant behaviors. Perhaps he realizes that he had a bit of a responsibility of Ambika's death, so that he's over-obsessed, over-addicted to son, attempting to give mother's love as well to him. Then in chapter 2, it says about Mali is an outstanding character. Mali is a unique child. Outer appearance is unique. Jagan is mesmerized by his appearance, right? He doesn't wear what Indian people wear. And again, we find that he looks different. He looks more of a Western person rather than an Indian person, right? He wears dhoti, but he wears trousers and shirts. Okay. This gives about Jagan's family history, how Ambika, how they married, and how he treated Ambika, what happened to Ambika, and it's about toothbrush that Jagan uses. He rejects all the Western products, otherwise artificial products, that he is adhered to kind of natural things like Margosa's twig. Then chapter 2 tells that Jagan is a rigid character. He's egoistic and rigid. He doesn't like to change his attitudes. And he says that he follows Mahatma Gandhi, otherwise Gandhian principles. Mostly, we find that he shows a lot of opposites to Gandhian principles at many places in the novel, making him a hypocrite. I need you to write down this term, hypocrite. H-Y-P-O-C-R-I-T-E, hypocrite. Hypocrite, hypocritic, hypocrisy. I know most of you use this term, but how many of you know the exact definition of a hypocrite? Kindly write down the definition. Write down, number 1, a person who tells something and does something different is called a hypocrite. Okay, person does something, tells something and does something opposite. Example, his norm regarding sugar. He says that he doesn't use much sugar, but he adds a lot of sugar in the sweets that he sells, right? So it's there. And again, sorry. And again, the second one, give me 1 minute. Very sorry, I had a bad throat. Was talking about hypocritic person, right? Hypocrisy, hypocrite. First, he says something, he does something different. That's one. Okay. Sometimes if I say I'm really religious, exactly, Oshad. Oshad කියපු වචනේ මම කියනවා නම් අර අපේ ජනවහරේ තියෙන දෙයක් හක්කේ බුදුරැස් බොක්කේ දඩමස් කිය. Okay, you say all these dharmika things. අපිට මේ හොඳ examples these days දකින්න වටපිටේ. But බොක්කේ දඩමස්. You tell something good then, but I mean, you engage in something completely different, right? That is what you call first requirement to be a hypocrite. Second requirement is you don't want, write down, you don't want others to have what you have. You don't want others to have what you have. It means, suppose I have a car, I'm jealous when other people buy cars. I have a car, I don't want the next door person to buy a car. I'm a hypocrite then. So we find these qualities in Jagan's character, right? In most of the times. The third quality is you don't want others to have what you don't have. What you don't have. You don't have a car, so you don't want others to have a car. Now, forget about Jagan and all. Now think about the colleagues in the school. Sometimes some people hide notes. They don't say that to which class they go. Okay, you don't share notes. Okay, you can't speak in English. You don't want others to speak in English. You're not good in maths. You don't want others to, go up in maths. So all these qualities are qualities of a hypocrite. So we identify Jagan's character as a hypocrite because of these reasons. So okay, that is about chapter 2. Now I move to chapter 3. Chapter 3 conspicuously talks about the conflict between father and son. Conflict between father and son. And guys, remember to write down this as well. What is conflict? Yesterday, some person had sent a question regarding conflict. Write down this little note regarding conflict. What is conflict? Conflict is of two types. This knowledge is important because we have conflict poetry. Okay, when you answer conflict poetry, you say, there's a conflict, here's a conflict. If you write like that, your answer is not really completed. It's really important for you to analyze the term conflict as a technical term. Okay, give it a technical appearance, right? First, conflict has two types. Conflict is of two types. First, external conflict. External conflict. External conflict can be further subdivided into two. Number one, man versus man conflict. Man versus man conflict. One man over another. Under that, the second one, man versus nature conflict. Your conflict is between man and nature. In our syllabus, we get conflicts like, in breakfast, we find man versus man conflict. In the poem, Farewell to Barn and Stracken Tree, we find man versus man conflict. And in the wave, we find man versus nature conflict, right? Man versus nature conflict. So these conflicts are defined as external conflicts. Bahira gatum, one on another or one on nature, right? Second type of conflict is internal conflict. Internal conflict. Internal conflict is further defined as psychological conflicts, otherwise emotional conflicts of humans. Now, if I take the breakfast, otherwise the poem breakfast, very sorry, you find an external conflict between husband and wife. Then if you analyze the conflict of breakfast, you have to say, initially we get the conflict between husband and wife presented in the poem. Wife, husband doesn't talk, wife suffers. Okay. Then what is the secondary conflict? Internal conflict, otherwise a psychological conflict of the wife. Initially man versus man conflict, external conflict. Secondarily, psychological conflict that derives in the mind of the wife. External conflict is coming to internal conflict, psychological conflict. Then for example, you fight with someone, external conflict, your psychology is confused, okay? With that confusion that you blame another person. Then because of external conflict, psychological conflicts can happen. So when analyzing poems connected to conflict, make sure that you realize the fact, conflict and its definition. When answering, it's really important to put it in that way, right? What is the initial conflict you get in this one? If you quickly go back to the poems, voice kind is an external conflict. One on another, one group, another group. The poet has an internal conflict after seeing this particular man versus man conflict. Then terrorist is watching, again, man versus man conflict. The narrator has a psychological conflict, otherwise internal conflict. External conflict, after seeing that, the narrator gets an internal conflict. Then farewell to barn and stack entry, I said, yes, man versus man conflict. Then guilty consciousness, the repentance, all are there in the culprit's mentality. Okay, the last is the breakfast. I discussed about that. So I'm glad that I could touch that area as well. The conflict we find in this novel, initially we find the conflict is between father and son, but mostly in most of the chapters we find the psychological conflict of the father is highlighted. I'm sorry. Yes, Oshada, your answer is really advanced. Thank you very much about that, connected to farewell to barn and secondary. Yes, father's psychological confusion, father's psychological changes are analyzed by the writer in different chapters. If you are to answer the essay type question, describe the conflict in the novel, you start it like that. How do you think that Jagan gets his psychological conflict? Do you find Mali too has psychological conflict? Yes, as a little child, after seeing mothers and fathers' conflicts, that he is psychologically confused and he rejects this tradition. And his psychology is further deflected by the social changes as well. Because of the arrival of modernity, westernization, he gets kind of psychological confusion. So when you analyze a question like that, make sure that you initially say, where do you think that the conflict begins and to what level conflict comes ultimately, right? Okay, then I move. Here we find Mali perfectly well says that he needs independence. He wants to become an independent child, rejecting food, and he says that I want to buy food from the canteen. Home cooked food, rejection of home cooked food means he rejects this domestic traditional culture, traditional domestic culture. He wants to become much of an independent person, and rather in Western modern societies, we find easy food, fast food, you can buy food. Cooking at home is a tradition. So, ගෙදරක කුස්සිය ලිපපත් වෙන්නේ නැත්නම් අපේ ලංකාවෙත් එක්ක තියෙනවා we don't take it as kind of a good thing, right? But in certain families, in certain Western families, you find mostly they buy food from outside, right? So you find that he's simple. I mean, he simply moved away from the tradition to modernity, Eastern attitude to Western attitude. And he's against this perfect living concept of the father. This is, I say, this is stereotype suggested by Gandhi and traditional India. Mali is against that. Mali doesn't like it. And moreover, we find Mali doesn't want to study anymore. It shows that Mali rejects traditional education system. Now, you all know the term student. Student means there should be a teacher student. There should be kind of teaching, right? On the other hand, now from next year onwards that we are going to have kind of curriculum change, right? Even in literature. So I'm also part of that. I'm so happy to say that. So I experienced that there is a need of a learner, one who learns. Perhaps even without a teacher, you're able to learn. COVID was a blessing for us to understand that we had a learner inside. We did not want teachers always. All right. We have a lot of sources. We have to utilize them and learn. Okay. So that Mali rejects traditional student role. And can you remember that he wants to become a writer in this chapter? What do you mean by writer? He writes and he teaches others. He becomes a failure in that. That's something else. But he says, I want to become a writer. I don't want to learn. That's kind of a radical notion, right? He doesn't want to absorb things. He wants to spread things through a book. Okay. And we always find that Cousin becomes a mediator. Cousin's character is very important. Your name is DMA person. Yes, of course, I can send the notes to you, surely. If you make a request, if you show your interest, I can definitely send, because it's good, because we are all in trouble these days. You're confused. You little ones are having kind of tough time these days. I'm ready to help. And even if there is any need, I see your confusion because my son is also in this forum. He's also finding it really tough to deal with this particular condition in the society and getting ready for the examination. So I can understand you all. So I can empathize with you all. So if there is any help, any further help, any note, just let me know. But anyway, I'll be doing that, right? Okay. So thank you for requesting. Thank you for certain messages I received from WhatsApp as well. Yes. Mali is uncommunicative. Jagan is also uncommunicative. Then who is the barrier? Bridge between father and son? Otherwise, I said the mouthpiece of Jagan and mouthpiece of Mali, who exchanges the messages, that is Cousin. Okay. Chapter 4 is little bit of, I can say that it's kind of a turning point of the novel. Mali grows up. He all of a sudden reveals that he wants to go to America. And please make sure that you contrast these two settings, India and America, traditional and modern, Eastern and Western. Conflict between Eastern and Western is presented with this particular appearance of the country, America. We all know that America is a center of modernization, center of, you need to write this term, capitalism, money, dollars, right? They mostly use their brain, practicality rather than heart. I don't say that Indian people are always very sensitive, but majorly we know that Indian, otherwise South Asian cultures value emotions, human emotions and relationships rather than Western cultures, right? That is why we love our family. That is why perhaps even after our marriage, we love our parent. Okay. If a parent believes that 18 plus to a child is a burden to the family, in South Asia, ගොඩක් ඔයගලගේ අයියලා අක්කලා ගෙදර තියාගන්නේ නෑ අම්මලා. even ඔයගොල්ලෝ තව අවුරුද්දකින් එළියට දානවා. Find your own ways. But here still in Sri Lanka, even though it's a burden to parents, they don't take it as a burden. They read their hearts rather than the brain. So America becomes kind of a contrasting setting in the novel. It's very important to understand. Then father doesn't know what's going on. That's something very important, right? They are the family, father and son. They are the family, but one party doesn't know what the other does. And Mali robs 10,000 rupees. He arranges everything. And Kasim is the one who rather passes a message to the father. This is something serious. This depresses Jagan very much. Chapter 5. This further declares about Jagan's depression of losing Mali. He was with Mali for a long time, and now he is alone. Ambika left, Mali left, now he's alone. But the problem is this, not the problem actually, the good thing is this, as I said earlier, Narayan makes Jagan's character, Narayan creates Jagan's character as an optimistic character. He attempts to see positivity of son's actions. Ek selfish vennat puluwan. Sometimes we all do that. Example, suppose that my father did not like me to be a teacher, but after I becoming a teacher, my father started seeing the good of it. It can be in that way. All right. So somehow the other Jagan changes his attitude regarding Westernization, modernity, and America when Mali went to America. This again shows inconsistency of Jagan's feelings, right? And Mali's letters are very symbolic. Mali does not want to share the personal information or feelings. He reports about America only. Even this makes Jagan spirited, right? Now, the tragic part of this chapter is Mali undermines his own culture, eating beef. Jagan doesn't like it. Jagan is Gandhi follower. In Gandhian principles, beef is completely rejected because Haraka kiyane sacred satek Indiave. And the latter part of the chapter we find Mali brings grace. I find Grace's character is also very, very symbolic. Grace's arrival to India is also always symbolic. I need you to think about these two terms, monoculturists and multiculturists. Monoculture. In India, we found Indian culture. People wanted everybody to follow the Indian culture only. They had a kind of a strong notion that India should follow Indian culture, especially conventional people. Then we can call them, they had that monoculturist attitude. What about multiculturalism? Now in the world, when you rather go to countries like America, you can't find people with monoculture. Suppose like Lanka මිනිස්සුන්ගෙන් අහනවා වගේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට අහන්න පුළුවන් ඔයාගේ තාත්තා කවුද අම්මා කවුද? So one might say, I'm not rather particular about that. My father was from Egypt. My mother was from China. I'm not particular about my grandfather. I'm going to marry an Alaskan woman. Something like that. They never care about the boundaries, right? So that their boundaries are expanded. If you want, you can write down this term, paradigm shift. PARADIGM SHIFT. Paradigm shift. Mostly in America, we find they shift their paradigm beyond casteism, social attitudes, social classes and all. They go beyond that and they achieve development in their countries. Okay. Example for paradigm shift again. After doing O-levels, you shift your paradigm. You go for A-levels and you find many friends and you go for different classes. And after A-levels, you go to university. Your paradigm, your vapasariya, your experience is shifted. So with every experience, with every notion, every meeting, you shift your paradigm. Okay, that is what we call paradigm shift. We find Mali's paradigm shift presented in the novel. And Mali goes to America, he shifts his paradigm. That is the reason that he doesn't marry an Indian woman. And sorry, he doesn't marry anyway, right? He doesn't lead a connection with an Indian woman here. Grace is half Korean, half what? American, yeah. And she's to lead a relationship with an Indian, right? So we find three different cultures amalgamated in Grace's character. And after coming to India, Grace is attempting to become a woman, Indian traditional housewife's character. Sometimes Jagan is so vexed. The word vexed is here. Vexed means troubled, seeing that this woman, not an Indian woman, that she's trying to strangely adapt to the culture of an Indian woman. Yeah, Jagan notices all. Somehow the other chapter 5 is very important, arrival of America to the discussion. We all know that America comes to be one of the central countries which brings transformation to many countries. Api dakka in Twilight of a Crane. In Twilight of a Crane, Kinoshita includes a currency in that. What is that currency? It is dollars, not yen. Japanese people use yen. But in the drama, we find dollars. It can be because of the translation, but it says Japan got the destruction because of America. Japan got the help to rebuild from America. So that it's kind of fair to include America as a territory in the discussion of Twilight of Crane. So here also we find involvement of America. It's not England. That is a wonder, right? It's not England. India got the freedom from England, imperialism. But now we are diverted our attention to America rather than England. So move. Chapter 6. The discussion of story writing machine. So certain articles say that it is the arrival of machinery, industrialization. This is not a computer. There is no much definition about story writing machine. And again, we find that it's a little bit impractical as well. When you put all these things, all information, you get a book out, otherwise a story out. We are talking about this sort of artificial culture being in a country where literature is so rich. Okay, Valmikila liyapu rate, right? Ramayana liyapu rate me machine eකට දාලා story එකක් ගන්න culture එකක්. Then you can find now Mali's notion is little impractical, but it is kind of a mild suggestion of arrival of industrialization to the country. Okay, we all know industrialization has arrived in India at this particular time, but it's growing in Sri Lanka also. During the 20th century latter part, like it grows up to climax. Now we find it is beyond the climax, like. Then father loves the son, but the son does not sense it. And Jagan gradually feels that he is losing the position in the house. Conflict is Mali attempts to reach the economic territory of the father. Father doesn't like that, right? You can reach my heart, you can love me, you can rather have me as a father, you can rather take me and jump me, put me up as a father, but you can't ask my money. That is kind of stingy point that Jagan reflects in the novel. When money is concerned, that father is little awkwardly disturbed, right? The $50,000 request makes Mali so troubled. Jagan so troubled. That makes Jagan avoids Mali and Grace. Okay. In the novel, it says, I don't know, it is because of his selfish notions, but somehow or the other he shows that money is evil. Money destroys Mali. So he gives that notion in chapter 6. Okay, so well. So we move to chapter 7. With that notion that he received from the previous chapter, money, evil, why money and all these, he reduces prices of sweets, becoming an individual in the commercial community. This is also a little impractical. In capitalistic societies, you are not able to take individual decisions. If possible, a trishow park trishow gana koitarian. First person says 100 rupees. If you feel that it is a little expensive, you go to the next one. Next one is also 100 rupees. If he hears that he charged 100 rupees, he doesn't want to put the other person down. There's kind of a unity in there, right? එක අපි දකිනවා දැන් ලංකාවේ හාල් වල මිල ගත්තොත් හැමෝම එකතු වෙලා ඒකේ උඩ දානවා. එක්කෙනෙක් එක පල්ලෙහාන් යටින් දෙන්න try කරන්නේ නැහැ. So that is kind of economic hypocrisy, right? So this disturbs other vendors. In the chapter, you can understand that they make a rally to Jagan's house. They start a discussion. All right. There we find hypocrisy in the world of hypocrisy in commercial world, capitalism. It is beautifully described in this particular chapter. And again, as a result of this meeting, Jagan meets Chinnadure, the bearded man. This is another turning point of the novel. Chapter 4, and this is chapter 7. This is a turning point. I don't say that bearded man brings solutions for Jagan's problems, but there's kind of a mild suggestion. There can be another solution for your problems. Then, as a result, he goes to retreat. Retreat, dano retreat. And usually we know that all people need a retreat. They have to sit in a calm and quiet environment and think, reflect about their lives. But Jagan did not have that much of opportunities in his life because of the confusion that he had been having from the beginning. Yes, Afsa, he goes to retreat in the 13th chapter, but here we find that he gets the idea of going to retreat. Neither. He had a little visit with that man, right? Jagan is not, Sasaniyaluttula sense, I assume Jagan is not fond of affording money for Mali's business because he might think as his business is a blind business. Exactly, Sasani. Because we discussed that at the beginning, Jagan believes that he is the one who can do everything in a perfect manner. මේ වචන දෙක මතක තියාගන්න. Egoistic man. He believes that he is correct always. But with the son's affairs only that he shows a little bit of flexibility. And the other one is he's a perfectionist. Perfectionist needs everything in a perfect manner. He needs everything in the way that he wants others to be done. Sometimes I too play the role of a perfectionist. Sometimes my people find it a little difficult to live with me because I need things to happen in the way that I want. There are certain things that I have in my life, like kind of a weakness. Okay. So I move to the next one. Chapter 8. Jagan realizes serenity of locality. Now, Jagan, the old man, had been having kind of confusion in his life with the problematic events that he encounters throughout his life. Okay, he did not have time to sit and think. Okay, but visiting locality takes his life to a different arena, different location. He finds serenity, calm and quiet attitude is so appeasing to him rather than confusion in his life. He ultimately realizes this is what people need. So we all are like that, right? Sometimes we were in the hustle bustle, we like to be with people, we like to associate with people, we like parties, but in my case, when I grew up, I too had a lot of friends, but now I like my freedom, individual freedom. I like to develop as an individual. It doesn't mean that I'm a hypocrite. It happens to everybody, right? When you age, you find different notions. You find that you develop. Jagan's character too shows different dynamics of the characters. He's a dynamic character. This is what we call his character develops with his perspectives. Exactly, Hafsa. He says that he's not getting too fond of money, but he doesn't want to waste money. That's something very, very important. Even at the last part of the novel, we know that he takes a cash book, right? Passbook with him. What is the reason that Yaturarangyan? So suppose that you say, okay, I leave all and I go to a retreat and you take a mobile phone with you. What the heck is that? Okay, you have to leave everything now. You have to leave everything. You can't take anything. So, Afsa, really well, I understand what you say. Jagan says, yeah, I have to leave everything. This is what I needed. But all of a sudden, his dilemma, inconsistently shows that, yes, money is not really important, but money is not to be wasted. And further, he knows that money can destroy Mali as well. So he has a strong notion about that as well. Then we go to chapter 9. The chapter shows that Jagan gets new strength, spiritual strength, like after getting the experience of the retreat, talking to rather people who are with spiritual lives. Okay, so that Jagan feels that there is a contrast between his life and the life that other people live. That he gets kind of a strength. And he says, he's 60 at his age at this chapter, he says that I have got new janma. Make a realize karaganone, we all get new janma actually, right? Now we discuss that in the poem Eagle as well. Eagle, after 30 years, like he goes to craggy mountains and breaks the beak and claws and all and finds a new life. Okay, similarly, if we behave like little children throughout our life, now I'm running to 48, like even after 48, if I run up to, if I behave like a little child, I live in the same janma of a little child. So it invites certain absurd comments from the society. So it's really good if you can understand the correct age and what age needs, what your psychology needs, and you can react to that. So there we find that he conveys the idea, it seems that I have got new janma. So this is kind of, I need you to write down this term, didactic messages in the novel. I have not rather given that topic here. Didactic, D-I-D-A-C-T-I-V-E. Didactic purpose of the novel. Didactic means educative, information, educative purpose of the novel. Now, a person who reads this novel would get the idea, derive the idea that Jagan gets, right? Now, your age is perfect enough to find new janma, new life, change of life. That it gives us a message. And if you rather study the novel further, there are many other didactic information. This gives about, this educates people about Indian marriage, Indian traditions, Indian outfits, and especially when it comes to Jagan's young age, how he went to see Ambika, how it had been a long process before the marriage. Perhaps you little ones never knew such kind of long process was there in prior preparation of a marriage. You too learn all these through the novel. Then novel has a didactic purpose, educative purpose. So remember that as well. Then Mali gets a strong strength and he refuses a story writing machine. And Mali comes for a conditional term. Mali transforms the relationship to a conditional one. If you don't give money, Grace has to leave. There is no reason that Grace has to stay in this country. Grace has to leave and we have to buy the ticket for Grace. This makes Mali little confused. I think there's a little grammar mistake here. Jagan evaluates of the concept of traditional wife. Now, this is one place where we find Jagan starts comparing, contrasting his life with his son. Sometimes I can't rather compare my norms with my son's norms, right? Because I lived in 80s, but my son lives in 20s. Okay, what Jagan sometimes goes wrong is that he's not able to identify the generation gap. Okay, so that is a problem, right? So he compares, contrasts the concept of wife after coming to know that Mali and Grace are not married. They're living together. He is shocked after hearing that, and he rather goes for a backstory of a reflection of a traditional wife in India. Chapter 10, Jagan meets Grace with the help of cousin and get to know that they are not married. It is confirmed. Grace tells it. Mali further troubles the father, and especially by now, when the son and father are detached, cousin's role becomes prominent because he has to run between. He becomes a go-betweener and rather exchange the messages of father and son. So chapter discusses about that. Chapter 11, feels depressed living in his house. He feels that he is living in his own prison like. And Mali refuses to marry Grace. He tries to patch up the situation, but Mali doesn't like it. He complains that Grace is not fit to marry. Mali has kind of complaints about Grace, calling that she's not sane in mentality, she's not fit to marry and all this. So Jagan becomes further depressed. Jagan finds if Grace marries Mali, that Mali would be controlled. But that is not to be fulfilled in his life. Chapter 12 is a flashback, a throwback of his wedding. This, as I said, it's a very good didactic message that we receive about Indian tradition. It tells us about how the marriages are arranged, how Hinduism involves in that, how holy a marriage is, and his life, his marriage, his honeymoon, and after that how the parents involved in their marriage, how he engaged in job after the marriage, and all these are rather informed to the reader in this chapter. And he further discusses about getting a child. Okay, think about this one as well. Ambika's character goes through many hardships. Ambika can be a question, but I think that Ambika's character came in 1 year. I don't exactly remember the year. If you write about Ambika used to live with a perfectionist, a theorist, a strict theorist, a traditional person, and a hypocritic businessman, a male-dominant man. And in a society where traditions become the priority, in the marriage, even at the childbirth. If you do not deliver a child, you are called a barren woman. B-A-R-R-E-N, barren woman. A barren woman is a bad sign, otherwise a bad omen to people living in that society. So Ambika's character goes through all these difficulties. And additionally, I say Ambika's physical difficulties that she attempts to tolerate, because the husband attempts to cure her with the herbal medicine and all, that she doesn't get the exact treatment. How she attempts all these, how she attempts the highly principled husband, how she attempts to live with that particular husband. This gives a notion that Ambika becomes a victim of this particular traditional system. Okay, but are we to experience that in grace? I feel grace is not rather restricted like Ambika, but she is also subjected to male dominance in the story. Even though she is coming from America, she is subjected to male dominance, right? Now she is unable to get her own decision. She's attempting to adjust herself. She becomes resilient, RESILIENT, flexible in this society, attempts to act as a traditional wife and all. Whatever it is, we find that she is unable to get away from the dominance of Mali. So then it gives kind of a comparison between these two characters, a woman and woman, how woman is victimized in the gender politics, male dominance, right? So Mali's and Grace's relationship, especially Grace's character, displays that woman is basically victimized under this particular system, even though it is the growing modernity and westernization. Okay, somehow or the other, unlike Ambika, Grace finds escape. Yes, Hafsa, I think that you're very familiar with the text. She sends a message. She also says that my headache is not half as unbearable as your talk. You would see me dead, I suppose. Sometimes she dislikes his talk rather than the headache. Like, exactly. Thank you. ඔගලන්ට පුළුවන් නම් වගේ quotations අදලා group එකට දාන්න. ඒක පිනක්. මොකද අනිත් අය share කරගනි. You can rather put the page number and you can just type, otherwise get a photograph of the quotations and send it to the group. In our group we find a lot. So material of the province, race, school and all, you all can share. It's a good community for a little time. I'm not going to close a group until you go to the exam. Please send all these beautiful quotations, nice, important quotations. Hafsa says that this quotation is there in the 16th page of the novel. Chapter 2, 16th page. Puluwan nang our group ekata දාන්න. මොකද there are people who work at the 12th hour. It can be a help for them to gain some marks from, by using these quotations, right? Thank you. Start having a community until you go to the exam. But even I'll be sharing certain information. I'll try to share certain answers people have written, right? Last chapter. Read this. Yes. Jagan's ultimate decision to go to the retreat. Okay. And ironically, while Jagan finds his life going to retreat, he is disturbed in the middle. Cousin brings the news that Mali is arrested by the police having illicit liquor in his car. This is the place where we find serious tension is created. And the tension is there because we have a little problem whether Jagan would stop going to retreat. What Jagan had been doing was that when Mali is disturbed sometimes, Jagan stops his work and treats Mali to find solutions. But at this moment, we find situational irony. Situational irony. Jagan does not stop his journey to the retreat. He says that he won't turn back, and he assigns the responsibility to Kasim to take care of him, and he further believes a bit of punishment would correct Mali. Even at this last moment, that he has an attitude that son should be changed. He is unable to carry on like this. Okay. Yeah, he thinks about Grace as well. He thinks bad about Grace, and he thinks about buying the air ticket to Grace, and not to forget that he takes a bank passbook, and even the key of the house. He had a little problem of keeping the key or leaving the key, and such dilemma was there with Jagan. So this adds kind of a humor as well to the novel. Example, මං කිව්වාගේ මහාන වෙන්න යනවා බැංකු පොත අරගෙන. දැන් නම් ඉතින් එහෙම තමයි. මහාන වෙන්න යනවා බැංකු පොත අරගෙන, that's kind of a ridiculous notion, right? You leave everything, then you leave everything, right? You should leave everything. But if you keep at least kind of a string to the material possessions, like, your attempt is in vain. So the novel ends up giving a very good message as well. And I do not like to say that always Jagan is correct. Okay, but Jagan attempts to become kind of an optimistic father throughout. He changes, he becomes resilient by and by. But Mali stays rigid and Mali stays hypocrite throughout. But on the other hand, if you analyze Mali's character as a tragicomic character, you can start his life from the childhood, how he loses the mother, how he starts living with the father like this, and how he becomes a young person in the transformation of India, who is experiencing modernity, westernization, and with a father who completely against modernity and westernization, and how his psychology changes, how he needs to become a different person, unique personality. With all these attempts, we find Mali too is victimized in this system. Don't always say that Mali is a kind of bad character, Mali is kind of corrupted. Yeah, there are two stories in the same character, right? Example, bad, good, both. Because Mali acts as the consequences that he met in life. His psychology changes according to the experience that he gets in life. Yes. Hafsa says, gives another one. Hafsa, it's good if you can tell the page number as well. Jagan says, I never know that the boy drank. At first, he was afraid that if he goes to America, he'll be corrupted by meat, women, and alcohol. By meat, women, and alcohol. Then balan me tunama venawani antimane, meat, he eats beef, and meat, the woman. But luckily that Grace is not really that much corrupted, and alcohol. This is one fear that Jagan had at the time that Mali went to America. Mali got corrupted by all three of these. It's a very good quotation, Hafsa. Please help others if you can, if you have them. Page 187. It seems that it is at the 13th chapter in the Hafsa. Yes, 13th chapter. You can find it out. As a service, Hafsa, please, if you have important quotations like that, send it to the WhatsApp group. Okay, send it to the WhatsApp group. You all can publish on the WhatsApp group. I have not closed it. Thank you. Yes, then we all find the characters in the novel all are victimized in this system, including Jagan, Ambika, then Mali, Grace, even Kasim. Kasim is also a victim. Bimsara, send me a message, then I can log you into the group. Don't worry about that. So I move in this novel as a summary. We discuss about transformation of India from tradition to modernity, Eastern to Western. And we discuss about Indian tradition, customs, and culture. And we excessively talk about family. At the very beginning, we find a complete family. And what are the concepts of families we find in the novel? We find Jagan when he was young, with Jagan's father, mother, and that typical and complete traditional family. And after that, Jagan's family. It starts as a complete family, but wife dies, then it becomes a single parented family. And after that, Mali's and Grace's family. It's not a family, it's kind of living together, but it is a modern definition of family. So if you get this question, please make sure that you answer having notions from all the characters and the relationships. Then marriage becomes a very important point we discussed. Marriage, at what points do we find marriage? Jagan's father's and mother's marriage. It lasted, even though it was traditional, it lasted. Okay, then Jagan's marriage and how it happens and how they live. And finally, we find Grace's and Mali's relationship. Don't ever call it a marriage. Then this gives notions about parenting. How Jagan's father Jagan's father provided the notion that he's a father to Jagan. Matakada, that the incident about the bathroom. How Jagan's father denied to wash. We don't have that much of an expensive thing like this is enough for us. There we found generation gap. In parenting, we find generation gap and conflict everywhere. Jagan had it with the father, right? And at the time when Jagan's father had a little quizzy bro regarding Jagan spends a lot of time with Ambika soon after the marriage, that Jagan had a problem with the parents. He started secretly meeting Ambika. So there was a conflict. Always there was a conflict, right? And that conflict is there between Mali and Jagan as well. Okay, think about them, parenting. Don't ever forget Jagan's father, Jagan's family, right? You need to get that as well because it's mentioned in the book. Then relationships are defined in the novel. Some are conditional, some are unconditional. Basically, we find Jagan's and Mali's relationship. We have to measure whether it had been conditional or unconditional. This is kind of a very complex definition. Critics say Jagan's and Mali's relationship had been on both sides. Jagan was little conditional about the relationship towards son. If son behaves in the way that he likes, he accepts the son. When the son goes against his notions, he's depressed. When there is if in a relationship, if you do what I like, I would keep you in a relationship like in Twilight of a Crane. Weave the stuff right away. If you weave only, I'm going to keep you. So then we have a little question whether Mali's and Jagan's relationship had been unconditional or conditional. All right. So do we find Jagan and Ambika's relationship as unconditional relationship? We find a little problem in that as well. When Jagan does not perform what Mali, I think I went wrong. When Jagan does not perform what Ambika says, there's a problem. If you do not stop tanning process, I would be angry, I'd be unhappy. That's kind of a condition in their relationship. Okay, but in most of the time we find whatever we say, Jagan maintains kind of unconditional relationship and conditional relationship towards the son. It is kind of dilemma in his mind. Sometimes it's conditional, but in the latter part of the novel, we identify whatever it is that he loves the son. What are the notions he finds here? He's ready to give the financial assistance to Grace to leave. And he's ready to leave all these and going to go his own ways. And he believes that money will corrupt my son. So if you do not love the son, that you will not be rather doing it like that. Someone speaks in the class. Someone's microphone is on. Okay. Yes. Then love. Here we find love between husband and wife, parents' love, love in a, what do you call that, living together relationship, love between people in the society, like cousin loves the others. Okay. Then again, you have to measure whether these relationships are conditional or unconditional. Love as a conditional love or unconditional love. This novel again gives you a very serious notion about love, whether it is conditional or unconditional. I personally believe there is no such unconditional love presented throughout the novel. There are suggestions of, there are intermittent appearance of in the heater, intermittent, INTERMITTEN, appearance of conditional love, unconditional love, conditional, unconditional. But I have a little notion whether we can rather, if you're unconditional love person, that you can't hate a person. So remember that. Communication in relationships, it's really important. How communication plays a major role in relationships. Yes, Afsa, it is page 46. He says, he was worried about Mali. Tell him to go by steam. It's safer. Let him be safe. This is a quotation that she suggests. The time that Mali went to America, if my memory is correct, using a plane terrifies him. So that he says, ask him to use that. Then it is much, it's not that dangerous. Perhaps it's his love. Sometimes we find that he changes. He changes the rigid attitude towards the son. First he says, no, you can't buy food outside. You can't buy food outside. Later on, you find that money is there on the table, right? You can't do this. You can't be a story writer. Then after that, you find that he buys everything to become a story writer. So his flexibility sometimes shows that he's having kind of unconditional father's love. But all of a sudden, Mali comes and suppresses that. Then Jagan reminds of that, yeah, I should rather have my son in the way that I want him to be. However, majority gattotte analyze karot, Jagan has unconditional love. Again, I say he has conditions as well to keep the son's love. Further, we discuss about gender, male gender, female gender. We discuss about human hypocrisy. It is well connected to Jagan. It's well connected to Mali and Mali as well. Remember about that. Mali's hypocrisy, it is highlighted. And growing capitalism, growing industrialization. And again, think about the last, remnants of colonization, remaining points of colonization. It gives us about the contrast regarding, it suggests us from the contrast of the outer appearance of people, or the outfits of people, like Mali's trousers. He sits on the lowly statue, and certain roads, certain areas that the writer suggests in Malgudi, they are from colonization. Novel suggests certain remnants of colonization. And one of the main remaining point of colonization is westernization. How westernization creeps into traditional India. So think about that particular point as well. Techniques. Third person narration is used in the novel. Okay. Narrator tells of the story of Jagan and the family. Irony. We find verbal irony. especially with Kasin's language, we find verbal irony and situational irony. Example, son rejects tradition. Son goes to America. Jagan wants the son to be like this, but son changes. Then we get dramatic irony as well. Example, Hondama thang tamai, Jagan doesn't know the plan of Mali to go to America. Reader comes to know that Kasin comes to know that Mali knows that, but last moment only Jagan knows about it. So then these are the places where we find dramatic irony as well. Then the story gives a lot of suspense from the beginning. Okay, with the relationship between father and son, we get suggestions of suspense. Example, Mali's rejection of eating home-cooked food gives suspense. What will happen? What will happen? His suggestion in stopping schools, what will happen? Then going to America, bringing Grace. When Grace comes, there's suspense. What will be the reaction of this man, Jagan? Okay, even at the last moment, right? Last moment in chapter 13, when Kasin brings the news that Mali is captured by police, suspense is created. What would be the decision of Jagan? Okay, then backstory as a narrative technique. The story starts when Mali is small. Mali is a student, child, but there's backstory. Through using flashback technique. Okay, backstory is a narrative technique, right? So it brings out about Jagan's childhood, Jagan's youth, Jagan's marriage, Ambika, how she came to be, and all these are revealed with the backstory. Then juxtaposition. What do you mean by juxtaposing? The word seems to be very serious, but I don't think that it is going to be very serious if I explain it in this way. Two things are put together. Like if I say, this paper is white. This paper is also white. But when you juxtapose them, when you put them side by side, you see this paper is whiter than this paper. Juxtapose. When you juxtapose things, we find contrast is created as an effect. Here, father and son are juxtaposed. Westernization, Eastern attitudes are juxtaposed. America and India are juxtaposed. Traditional marriage and living together are juxtaposed, put together to see. Woman, Ambika, woman, Grace are juxtaposed. So it is used as a technique. Okay, then humor. Humor is there, but again, I find that we don't find the total novel is a humorous novel. It carries a lot of notions about tragedy and a comedy. So I would like to mention it as a tragicomic novel. Questions can be from information from social information, political information, economic, interpersonal and intrapersonal information. If it is about social change, if it is about modernization, if the question is about tradition versus modernity, the question falls into social category. That's what I said. Please make sure that you get a short note on social information presented in the novel, political information, economic, and so on. Then you can guess what sort of questions will appear in the question paper. I don't like to guess certain things to the point. But when you have kind of a network of information, it is quite easy for you to rather face the exam with strength. Then what are the political information, especially micro-political information? If you roll back, I promise to give this video to you. If you roll back, you can see I explain the term micro-politics, like man-woman politics, father-son politics. Micro-politics, otherwise control exercised in micro levels. So we find Jagan's power over the son, otherwise Mali's power over the father. Then power of westernization over Eastern society, power of money over poor, rich over poor. If such questions are there, such questions fall into political layer. Then economy, growing capitalism, and power of money, and how power of money challenges the traditional system. All these are economic information. And in chapter 1 we find economic disparity, DISPARITY. Economic disparity. Some are rich, some are poor. Some buy sweets, some come and hang around the showcases. Then what does Jagan do? He chases them away. Sometimes little children, they don't have money to buy sweets. He's not generous enough to give them. Then this is kind of a contemporary notion as well. Money is centralized at one or two people. Then the majority is poor. Okay. Then interpersonal layer and the questions related to that. I suggested relationships between interpersonal means relationships, relationship between Mali and Jagan, Grace and Jagan, Grace and Mali. These questions will fall into this. Then intrapersonal, psychological changes. We discussed about depressed mind of Jagan, rigid mind of Jagan. Okay, Mali's dilemma, 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 to stay back in India or go to modernity. Then Grace's dilemma, to stay in this relationship or leave the relationship. Jagan's dilemma, to love the son or not to love the son, to give money or not to give money. Depression, dilemma, then alienation as a psychological condition. ALIENATION, alienation, that you become a sort of a different person in the community. Like we find Grace as alienation. After Grace comes to India, we find she tries really hard to fit, but she can't rather totally fit into Indian culture. Okay, even though Mali lives in India, Mali's alienation can be seen. Ms. Shirani, can you mute your microphone? It constantly disturbs. Yes, then we go to